Prime Minister says a new billion-dollar vaccine manufacturing plant will help Australia fight any future pandemic. Live to Olivia Leeming in Canberra. Good morning, Olivia. Now, this will be the largest facility of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, good morning, Anne. So that Australia can stockpile vital flu vaccines and life-saving antivenoms. This facility will be built in Melbourne, opening in 2026 under a deal with CSL's subsidiary Securus to also secure supplies of any coronavirus vaccines that might be needed in the future. Scott Morrison has been meeting with businesses this morning in Melbourne for his first visit since the pandemic, and the Health Minister says this new complex will create some 1,300 new jobs.
To be able to lock that capability in over 2 decades is immensely important for jobs, but above all else for health security in Australia.
And Olivia, the Prime Minister flies to Japan tonight.
Yes, heading to Tokyo to meet Japan's new Prime Minister, expected to sign a new defence pact to boost military operations, including patrols in the South China Sea, though that threatens to further escalate tensions with China, who's refused to take calls from Australian ministers for the past year. Scott Morrison, though, says he'd like to meet with the Chinese president if invited.
University of Queensland's potential coronavirus vaccine with CSL has been abandoned after trial participants returned false positive HIV test results. This was one of 4 vaccines which the Morrison government had entered into a deal with and is a blow to Australia's potential pool of vaccine options. Let's go live to Canberra now for some reaction with Tom Connell. Tom, good morning to you. It's a significant development.
It is. So this is reported this morning from Rob Harris in Nine newspapers. This deal has been abruptly terminated. The timeline was this. On Monday, CSL working with UQ found this issue. They informed the government. By Thursday, National Cabinet had abandoned the use of the vaccine. There were 200 trial participants in this vaccine. Several of them have returned false positives. That's important to stress, false positives for HIV. And sources, according to this story, are saying these people are not actually at risk. So how has this happened? Well, this vaccine actually uses a small component derived from HIV. So it's able to, it's used in the vaccine. It's not able to infect people nor replicate in the body. What it is able to do is start a response within the body that can actually interfere the screening process. And so that means return a false positive. We don't know how long the false positive, so this was always warned about. So no risk, and it was always a possibility. Why this decision? Well, this appears to be out of an abundance of caution. We know the importance of having confidence in vaccines. We know the risk of misinformation in these campaigns, and it appears for that reason, we'll hear more from the government, of course, later on today, but it appears for that reason it has been scrapped completely. So it's about public confidence in other vaccines. This decision, of course, would have been influenced by. This decision was, well, perhaps hinted at yesterday afternoon by the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, in a radio interview.
Just getting updates all the time on this. You know, we have got 4 that we've been working on, and we always knew not all of those would, necessarily get there, and so we'll just follow the medical advice on all of that.
So we always knew not all of those would necessarily be successful. The government paid $4.5 million out of a fund up front, but the $1 billion, significant news, the vaccine abandoned, but this is all about confidence in the vaccine in Australia. We know how important that is for people to have confidence to actually take the vaccine and all the benefits that would flow to our economy.
Yeah.
Former Merck pharmaceutical rep who later turned into a strong advocate for vaccine education has suddenly and strangely passed away. Brandy Vaughn is a name you might not know, but she, who used to work for Merck Pharmaceuticals, became a powerful voice in the movement for better vaccine education and the fight against mandatory vaccines across the country. She was found dead a few days ago, but what's interesting here is I actually met her almost 2 years ago at an event in Mexico in which she specifically talked to me about people who were speaking out against the pharmaceutical industry suddenly and mysteriously passing away, including a slew of mysterious suicides.
The video I'm about to show you is very disturbing. It's of Brandy Vaughn, the ex-employee of Merck Pharmaceutical, who is a whistleblower. She has the organization learntherisk.org, and she was found dead yesterday. In this video, she documents the intimidation tactics that were taking place within her home and around her in order to silence her. At the end of the video, she says that she will not stop, that these mandatory vaccinations are for profit and not for public health. Keep that in mind when watching this video, that Merck is the vaccine company that makes the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. I've screen recorded this video because of the censorship and because so many videos are disappearing. I encourage you to do the same. Please share this video. We owe it to Brandy to keep this fight going.
Hi, I'm Brandy Vaughn, and for those of you who don't know me, I have been an activist speaking out against SB 277 here in California.
Wow, what happened to our rights?
Yeah.
How did I sit back and let this happen?
Yeah.
This is a very slippery slope.
In this fight, I have been under a little bit of heat, and I wanted to document this just in case. I wanted to show some of the intimidation tactics that I've been under.
There is a lot of shady stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
I got involved in this fight because I used to work for Merck here in Santa Barbara where I live, and I worked there from 2001 until 2003, and I sold Vioxx for Merck. Vioxx was eventually taken off the market, and it was proven that Merck had knowledge that it increased heart attacks and stroke by 2 times, and it injured and killed a lot of people. It was eventually pulled off the market, and I lost a lot of faith in the healthcare system. I went to Europe, and then I came back with a 6-month-old son, and I was bullied at the pediatrician's office in San Francisco when I asked to see vaccine inserts and questions about them. That was a huge red flag for me because I already had mistrust of doctors and the healthcare system in general, and pharma. And so I did a lot of research, and that was 4 years ago, and that was where my vaccine research started. And I realized that they were not very safe, actually, and not very effective, and I chose not to vaccinate my son. So when I heard about SB 277 in California, I decided that it was important that my voice was heard and that I was speaking up against it and part of the fight. So when I made that decision 3 months ago, I know that I knew I was going to take some heat for it, but I wasn't quite sure how much heat. And so I'm making this video today to describe the intimidation tactics that have been used against me to try and silence me. The first one happened when I was coming back from the Capitol, a rally in Sacramento against SB 277.
We're not going away! We're not going away! We're not going away! We're not going away!
And I came home with a friend to my hide key being on my doorstep, open to the key. And the story behind this was a year ago when I bought my house, I hid that deep in the bushes, and 6 months ago I had looked for it because I thought, well, it's probably not a good idea to have a key to my house right outside my door. I couldn't find it, but when I came back from Sacramento, that one time, it was about 2 months ago, that the key was on my doorstep, open to the key. That day I had my locks changed, and I called an alarm service, and I installed a $3,000 alarm system 2 days later. So what happened apparently is someone opened the door, the front door, went through the front door, picked the lock, and my alarm went off, and they immediately disarmed it with the master code, which nobody had but me. I made sure nobody else had that code, and they disarmed it at the panel with that code. Panels inside. According to the alarm company, at 3:45 in the morning, somebody entered in through the front door, the alarm went off. They disabled the alarm by putting in the master code right away into the panel. And then at 3:46 in the morning, my hallway monitor sensor went off. So someone went down the hall. And then at 3:48, someone opened my dining room window and then closed it right away. And then if you notice, the dining room window actually faces out towards the backyard, which is much more private than the front door, which they used to enter that time. And then they went over to the keypad, entered the code again, and then left through the front door at 3:49. After the incident, I talked to some security experts who have actually done intimidation for corporations, and they explained a few things. They said, well, A, they were probably tapping your place, so everything I say and do in here is listened to, if not watched. And then opening of the back window, because it's a much more private way to get in for future reference, for future visits. When I did return home, and the police came in and made sure nobody was here, and then I came in after the alarm was set off, after the break-in. And what I did notice was they had left this window unlocked, like this. And before I left for Sacramento, all of the windows and doors were locked, double locked actually. I went through twice to make sure that they were locked. So after that happened, I didn't really feel comfortable sleeping in my house again, because of course they could come in and disarm my alarm whenever they wanted. There wasn't really another way to secure the system. I changed the code, but again, who knows how they got the code in the first place. The security expert is pretty convinced that the house is tapped, my phone is being listened to, my conversation, my text messages, and then my computer, both my computers as well. The next thing that happened actually was with my computer. So one of the things that the police wanted to know was if anything was taken in the break-in. Of course, nothing was, because they weren't here to take anything. I did have a computer here in a hiding spot, and when the police were here, I did actually come and look to make sure the computer was still here, and it's here above the microwave is its hiding spot. It's not a place anyone would know to look for the computer, and it's not, you know, especially in being here only 4 minutes. 2 days later, after that happened, after the break-in happened, I walked into my place to move some stuff out, and the computer was taken from its hiding place and put in the middle of the floor. And so I came back home to pick up some stuff. I wasn't staying here any longer. And that message was there, which was obviously very scary, because clearly somebody had been listening in, if not watching, as to where the computer was. So after that, I decided that it would be best to get out of town, and I left town for a couple of weeks and really went off the grid for a good part of that. So after the computer incident and leaving town for 2 weeks, the day that I came back, I had a friend come with me, and him and I arrived at my place and found a ladder open right in front of my door, looking into the windows, the bedroom window. Now, this is my ladder, but this ladder lives in the garage. So it was clear that somebody had accessed the garage, brought out the ladder through the side of my house, opened it, looking right up into the window, and this happens to be the only window that I had blinds open. So that was quite a message. The security experts said, wow, what a better message than to say we're watching you. And this actually happened the day that I came back into town, so they clearly knew that, well, it happened the night before. They clearly knew when I was coming back. The neighbor who was feeding my dogs came over after half an hour after we found the ladder, and she asked, so what's with the ladder? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I didn't put it there. And she said, well, it wasn't there yesterday. So it means that it happened the night before I came back into town after 2 weeks. So clearly they are watching. The next incident was just 2 days later, and that's in the garage. This Buddha was on the floor. Normally the Buddha is pretty heavy. It was on here on top of the dog cage, holding the towel to cover it up at night for the dogs. So it was taken off of here, and there's really no way it could have fallen because, I mean, it's actually really heavy, and if it had fallen, it would have fallen, you know, some different way. But I walked in and I found it right there on the ground. The pictures were also knocked over. So then 2 days later, I noticed it first through the kitchen window, and it's not something I have ever seen before, but there is a duck. On my table. And when I talked to the security experts, I said, I don't understand the duck. And then it came to me that I had been on my phone having a lot of conversations about people asking me, you know, are you staying at your house? What are you going to do? And I used the term repeatedly, well, I'm not staying at my house. I feel like a sitting duck because they can get in at any time. And, you know, I'm a sitting duck. And so that was actually quite disturbing to come home to. Now I have a duck. I have never seen it before. It's not mine. Nobody else is having access that would bring a duck. It's a clear message that, again, they are watching me. And the intimidation is quite, you know, intimidating. And it's quite scary. So after all of these intimidation tactics, it's very hard to feel safe and secure, but I am not gonna go away. I mean, I'm not gonna be silenced because these are important issues and we need to expose what's really going on behind the mandatory vaccination bills. It has nothing to do with public health. It has everything to do with profit. And I hope that we can all continue this fight. It's we may have lost the battle, but we still have a war to win. And hopefully by documenting this intimidation, they won't be able to get away with it in the future with me and with anyone else who speaks out. There is some evil going on here.
I said, well, this is crazy. And then in May, I was being criticized by some of my colleagues in the Senate because they felt I was trivializing the present situation. And I'm not trying to trivialize it. I'm just trying to provide some reasonable perspective. And then June, July, August, September, I spent defending my license.
Tell me about the comments that you made that were reported. What did you say?
Well, the first time around, I was accused of spreading misinformation because I had compared COVID-19 to influenza in a fashion similar to what Dr. Fauci and Dr. Mike Osterholm in Minnesota have done. So I was astonished about that. I was also accused of providing reckless advice, and that was in late June, and then that was dismissed in late July. And then in August, another investigation was initiated, and that time I was identified as a danger to public health because I took the 2009 swine flu pandemic and tried to draw comparisons between it and our present situation in regards to a variety of features: seasonality, length of time, what kinds of mitigating measures might have been tried in 2009 versus 2020. And for that, I was a danger to public health, and then that was dismissed in October. So right now, I'm happily not being investigated.
If you say something to the contrary of what social media companies have deemed as acceptable, if you say something that's contrary about coronavirus, you are immediately not just censored, but threats against your livelihood, against your ability to practice medicine. I mean, it just seems, we hear so much talk today about stand up against fascism. It seems like such a fascist idea.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think back to March, I was attacked by bureaucrats because they said that I was minimizing the impact of COVID-19. And I simply was trying to provide context. In our country, I think a lot of folks don't realize that we have almost 10,000 people die every day in the United States. 1 out of 100 people in the United States dies every year. We have something in excess of 300 million people, but 3 million people die every year. These are not alarmist statements. These are not conspiratorial statements. These are facts. And so when I started being criticized in March, and then in April, I saw the, if you will, the bogus advice we were getting as to how to complete death certificates, I said, well, this is crazy. And then in May, I was being criticized by some of my colleagues in the Senate because they felt I was trivializing the present situation. And I'm not trying to trivialize it. I'm just trying to provide some reasonable perspective. And then June, July, August, September, I spent defending my license. I don't think there's any question that there is a divide that is astonishing. I mean, I lived through the 1960s civil rights movement. I lived through the Vietnam peace. This is remarkable. And honestly, I think one of the notable sources of blame belongs on physicians. I don't think that we have held up science at the level we should. Science is just three things. It's observation, it's measure, and then it's hypothesize. Create a hypothesis that would explain what you saw and measured, and then develop an experiment to either confirm or deny your hypothesis and ask other scientists to do the same. It's at that point that we have science. But if you actually look at what we did in 2009 and look at what we're doing now, everything changed on a dime 4 or 5 months ago. There was no randomized control. Yes, I'm talking about if you look at what we did with influenza, with 2009 swine flu, and look at what we're doing now and the mitigating policies. In 2009, we did not close schools lock, stock, and barrel. We did not lock down. We did not go crazy about the value of masks. We did not do any of these things in 2009. Everything flipped about 4 or 5 months ago, not because we had good science, randomized controlled studies, double-blinded studies, peer-reviewed studies. We had just a lot of panic and fear, and we had a lot of gobbledygook, a lot of mud thrown on the wall, and we were just picking and choosing, and everybody saying, heavens to Betsy, the sky is falling, we've got to do something, so we're going to make a mask mandate. Fine, that's not a hill I'm going to die on. But I think if we have vulnerable people thinking that they're doing what they need to do by wearing a mask, we're hurting them because we're actually lulling them into potential care. Full focus on protecting the vulnerable people. That's where your quarantines go. That's who gets the most support. But what we've done is flipped it around. We've said we're going to take the population of people that are least vulnerable, the 0 to 30-year-olds, and we're going to lock them down. We're going to say no school. We're going to say no phonetics, no ability to learn how to talk and write as a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old with a teacher having no mask on. What we've done, we will pay for decades.
Hey Instagram, did you guys miss me? I feel like I haven't been on really in the last 2 weeks, and the truth is I'm 9 months pregnant, and I've just been working on finally getting a nursery together and realizing that I'm going to be a mom in a couple of weeks. But I had noticed that a lot of people were tagging me in a comment that I made on Instagram a few days ago when I was talking about vaccines, and a lot of people wanted me to clarify my position on vaccines overall, and to, I guess, elaborate on the incident that I hit on in that post about me having been injured by a vaccine, which is why it transformed my thinking about vaccines over time. So I will start by telling you guys the story. First and foremost, my stance on vaccine is that I am not explicitly pro-vaccine, and I am not explicitly anti-vaccine. What I am pro is people using their brain and assessing the risks and evaluating whether or not it is a good idea to take a vaccine. I think any blanket statements when I come across people that are like, I'm against all medicine's bad, I think that's incredibly foolish. When I come against, when I come across people that say I'm pro-vaccine and every single vaccine that the government creates I will stick into my arm, I think, those are opposite sides of the same coin, and it's ignorant. And I used to be a super ignorant pro-vaxxer. What I mean by that is that I personally just thought that every time a doctor tells you to get a vaccine, you should get it, and that you should not ask any questions. And that's because obviously I'm vaccinated. When I was a child, I was vaccinated. The vaccine schedule has changed dramatically since I was a child. It is much more aggressive. But I just thought, hey, if the doctor says to do it, you just do it. All of that changed. I was about 20 years old when, and people will remember this if you are I'm an 89 baby, but you'll remember this if you are a millennial. Suddenly, they started pushing in commercials really aggressively the Gardasil vaccine, HPV vaccine. The irony is that I had never even heard of HPV. We had never even learned about that as an STD or an STI in school. And very suddenly, they were saying that every single woman, this is the interesting part, women needed to go get the Gardasil vaccine, which was a 3-part series of shots that was supposed to guard against cervical cancer. So specifically for women, and it was supposed to be a guard against cervical cancer. I went to my gynecologist and he's like, yes, you should get this. So we're going to start vaccinating you. The first time I got the first part of the series, as soon as he gave me a shot, I passed out. And he thought that it was because I hadn't eaten breakfast, and I hit the ground, and he said, maybe you didn't eat breakfast, and I actually had not eaten breakfast, so, just thought it was a weird thing. I was a bit shaken about it, but just thought this was a weird circumstance where I just didn't have energy, and I got a shot, and I passed out. Well, lo and behold, I then went to get the second part of the series, and made sure I had a small breakfast that morning. I think my appointment was in the early afternoon, got on the table, and the nurse came in, and as soon as they put the shot in my arm, I not only passed out again, but when I woke up, I instantly started vomiting and seizuring all over my nurse, and then she called in the 2 doctors. Both of them were male. Really awkward time because I had already undressed for my examination, so I was also naked because the little towel thing that I had over me had fallen off because I hit the ground so hard. It was just a really terrifying, awful experience. I'm not a person who has ever had seizures. I'm not a person who passes out, by the way. That would have been the 3rd time in my life that I had passed out, 2 times being in that office. When I came to, both of the doctors, there were 2 doctors in that office, were in there, and he had basically said that you are having a reaction to this vaccine for whatever reason, and we're going to recommend that you don't get it anymore. When I remember, I was crying hysterically, and when I left, I was really shaken up, and I went to my mom's office, which was very nearby, and had just sort of said what had happened. And it was really nerve-wracking for me because then as time went on, I started hearing stories from other females who had had really bad experiences with this vaccine, girls that were my age. I had some friends who had no reaction to the vaccine, and some friends that did have, some friends that said that they became a type 1 diabetic after getting this vaccine. I am not at all saying that that is what happens, and I cannot confirm or deny that information. I'm just telling you what girlfriends that I have been that I was friends with in the past said had happened to them. And I started digging into this vaccine and thinking to myself, why did I just allow this doctor to inject me without doing any research? Really, because I have faith in medicine, I have faith in doctors, and I would think that doctors would never recommend something that would be harmful to me. But as I started researching the vaccine, I was first off really surprised to learn just how low instances of cervical cancer are in America altogether, right? So cervical cancer, if you look up American Cancer Society, there are currently 166 million women that live in the USA today. Of those 166 million women, there are an approximate 13,000 new cases of cervical cancer a year. And only 4,000 cervical cancer deaths per year. So it's incredibly interesting, in my opinion, bizarre, that we would have a medical institution that would want every single woman to get vaccinated against a type of cancer that only 14,000 or 13,000 women new cases acquire annually. I think that those numbers just don't justify everyone getting a vaccine, and certainly not pushing it upon women in the way that they did. It was every day. Everybody remembers these commercials. You have to get this vaccine. It's safe for women. The most bizarre part about that Gardasil vaccine is that years later, they transformed it and started saying, well, men need to get it too. So this went from initially being something that was promoted as for women and for cervical cancer to being something that suddenly was promoted for men too. And I started seeing the commercials years later of little boys saying, my mother could have saved me from having cancer if she had just given me the HPV vaccine or, had just given me the vaccine. And that is when I I was really kind of like, oh my goodness, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional, but I don't know how we went from just women to now everybody needs to get it. And then we started having politicians trying to force this upon 5-year-olds. And I think it was in the state of New York. Do not take that as a fact, just definitely look it up. But the women, the mothers fought against this. They were trying to mandate in one of these states that 5-year-olds get vaccinated against HPV, which is super bizarre because HPV, first and foremost, is a sexually transmitted disease. And which can lead, by the way, just to connect the dots for those of you that don't know why I'm saying HPV and cervical cancer, they said HPV can lead to cervical cancer if it goes untreated. The majority of people who get HPV, it goes away on its own without any treatment. So that's probably why we had never learned about this STD when I was in high school. We were learning in health class about STDs. We never even learned about it. And in a certain state, I'm almost convinced it was New York, but again, fact check that independently. They suddenly wanted to mandate this on 5-year-olds, and it terrifies me. Knowing how I reacted to it, knowing how scared I was, knowing that I passed out twice, that I had a seizure, that I threw up, the idea of a 5-year-old being mandated to take that, it's scary stuff. So it forever altered my opinion on vaccines, meaning that I would never, ever, ever be a person that would just get a vaccine because a doctor said so, meaning that I always perform my own independent research. I am not afraid to say that. I mean, we have been such a vicious and disgusting society against moms who speak out about their children getting injured by vaccines. We treat them like they're all crazy conspiracy theorists, which is interesting because first off, we're in the era of believe women, but we don't like to believe moms when they talk about what's happening with their children, when they say their children were fine until they got a certain vaccination. And what's interesting about these women that do say that is that they are spread across every different background, every different socioeconomic class. I mean, there are rich, wealthy women and poor women coming together, women of all races, to say something happened to my child. It's entirely plausible that two children don't have the same reaction. I know, again, I have a girlfriend who had no reaction to any of the HPV vaccine. She had no reaction to Gardasil. I did have a reaction. How could someone tell me that my experience wasn't real? How can someone continually tell parents that are saying that something has happened to their child after they got a vaccination, that their experience is not real? And how do we say that at the same time that we protect the vaccine makers from lawsuits, that they cannot be sued if somebody is injured? And we see this tremendous gaslighting of moms. And so now that I have a platform, I want to use it to support those moms and to say that I believe you. I believe you because I've had a vaccine. I was vaccine injured and I had a reaction when I got a vaccine. And I don't think that your story necessarily means that every person in the entire world should never get vaccines and that it's bad. But I certainly acknowledge that vaccines are not a one-size-fits-all, and I think that it is important to assess the risks and the benefits and to conduct your own independent research. We saw the media completely dog people like Jenny McCarthy, Kristen Cavallari, people that came out and said that they don't vaccinate their children. And we've all just decided that this is the highest crime against humanity, and we don't even have the discussion. Okay, well, if vaccines work and vaccines are amazing, why aren't we even allowed to have the discussion? Why is it being censored? I think now is especially the time where we can start talking about this stuff because we are more awake as a society to the evils of the pharmaceutical industry in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, and them essentially trying to implement concepts of forced vaccinations and going to have to be mandatory, and understanding just the numbers behind how much money pharmaceutical industries make. And we know where there is money, there is an incentive. And I think I've never seen this many people, both people that say they are pro-vax and anti-vax, coming together to discuss their lack of comfort with rushing a vaccine, with saying that you want everybody to get it. We should always pause and ask questions. And I, as a mom to be, am definitely, obviously not a shy person, so I don't really care what you think about me. In me saying that I don't believe in all vaccines, I believe you should research risks and benefits. If you think that makes me whatever name you want to call me, At the end of the day, I'm still Candace Owens, and what people think about me means very little. I'm going to make the best decisions for me, best decisions for my future child. That's it. Love to open up the discussion in the comments, and Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates are evil. The end.